Welcome back. You're still watching Nile TV International and The Breakfast Show with Shireen Adil and myself, Mohammed Abdurrahim. And we will be continuing our series here on The Breakfast Show about Pharaoh Akhenaton, one of the most mysterious, of course, kings of ancient Egypt. Researchers have discovered 3 tombs dedicated to him, full of even more secrets. We've talked about his rich life, his call for monotheism, and in the past episodes we'll also be talking now about the conclusion of his reign. We have the great pleasure of having with us Egyptologist Samir Abbass, who has been taking us through the life of King Akhenaton to continue this series. A very good morning to you, Mr. Abbass. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Good morning, and
morning,
pleasure to be
Mr.
with you
Samir.
too.
Good morning. First, before talking about the end of King Akhenaton's reign, we'd like to brief us on our last episodes in which we talked about his life and his reign.
This is our third episode today for talking about Akhenaton. And Akhenaton as a subject is a very rich subject. So you can dedicate an entire
many episodes.
Many episodes, for that. And what I was trying to do actually in these episodes is try to get people to understand how important this king is and how important this era is. Even when we consider that one of the very interesting facts about Akhenaton, that his history has been in purpose, has been removed and destroyed by his successors in ancient Egypt. It was destroyed in a way that to make sure that nobody will remember this pharaoh, and mainly because of his idea, because they didn't like the idea of worshipping one god to be common in Egypt or in the ancient world in that time. And we are lucky to know about him today, and that's something which they would like to talk about today as well, which is the end of Akhenaton, the end of his idea, and also how we know about him and how much we know about him, because it seems that there's still lots of holes about Akhenaton idea, thoughts, and history and death as well, and not being revealed yet. So in the previous episodes, we talked about how he came to power. We talked about his family. Remember when you showed an interest?
His mother, his mother was a commoner. Right.
That was exactly. You were talking about Queen T, which is the wife of Amenhotep III.
Yes.
And Muhammad, you told me how much you were interested with Amenhotep III when you was studying history with your kids. I remember that very well. And that was a very good start, because we cannot understand the character of Akhenaton without looking at his background, his family, and what was happening in Egypt at that time, and how big Egypt was as an empire at that time, and the different influences in the court, which is including many princes, royal families from the Middle East, from the Far East. They were living in the Egyptian court at that time. And also we talk about a possible connection between Akhenaton and Abraham teachings and religion, which is brought by those princes, which came from the Middle East, and he grew up with these ideas, and possibly that was his main influence in monotheism religion. And also we talked about him. He's not the heir of the throne, but he has to take this step after the early death of his elder brother. And we talked about that he was not ready for this position. Even his father, by the way, his father and his mother, they knew that he's not trained for this position. That's why his father decided to declare him as a co-regent with him in his life, to make sure that he will have no problem in taking the power after that. And then we talked about the challenges he faced when he became as a king. And these challenges already started a long time, even before his father, from his grandfather's time, Thutmose IV, when the monks, the rise of the power of the priests of Amun-Ra, and how they became very annoying of the royal family, which is like putting their fingers and trying to manipulate and control politics, and how starting from the grandfather Thutmose IV, this family was trying to shift the power away from the priests of Amun-Ra. But they were trying to do that slowly and gradually. But for a young king, which is he's very passionate, he wanted to change it actually fast, and that was possibly his big mistakes, to go for a big change and fast change. And we talk about how he was trying to introduce the new cult of Atun, and the differences between Atonism and the mainstream religion in Egypt in that time. And then we talked about a change, a dramatic change, when the king decided to change his name and move to a new capital, which is he built, Akhenaton, and change his name into Akhenaton, the benefitable to Atun, and marrying from Nefertiti, and which has become a very good support for him, and moving to the new capital and chiseling out and removing the names of Amun from his name, from his older name and from his father's name. And also I took you on a virtual tour in Al-Amarna, which is a ruins of Al-Amarna, that's which is capital, and we talked about the ideal location.
Yes, in the heart of Egypt, in the middle of
exactly.
Egypt.
So today we will talk about the end of his story and how it comes to the end.
And how long he reigned.
And how long he reigned for nearly 15 to 17 years.
But let me ask you, you've just said that they tried, the kings who came after him, they tried to destroy all the documents that show us more about his life.
Yes.
But still, we know more about his reign from you now. How did you know about
okay, so how we know that was by coincidence, first of all, and this coincidence happens in the middle of the 19th century. An Egyptian farmer from Armenia, and she was going and looking for sabakh. Sabakh is the old mud bricks, which is used for buildings because it has still nitrogen and nutrients, which is used in fertilizing the lands. That's why they call it sabakh, and that's why the word sabakh became the term for many archaeological sites in Egypt today. So, and when she was picking that, she found by coincidence tablets which is less than, like almost the half of the size of the hands. These tablets made out of clay, burned clay, and it had a very unusual written language on it. It wasn't hieroglyphics. It was one of Kanani language, Akkadi, more specific Akkadi language. And she found them, and she didn't know what is the importance of these actually tablets. And she sold them for one of the Western travelers, explorers for less than 20 piasters at that time. And they are 380 letters. Considered the most important thing has been found in Al-Amarna. These letters, they are diplomatic messages between the Egyptian king and the kings of the ancient world in that time. Think about how important these finds, and that is the beginning. That's what's, when these letters made it to Europe, they are, unfortunately, they are scattered all over the European museums now, only a few of them in the Egyptian museum. That's attracted the attention to, there is a king, which is not in the king's list, which is left by the ancient Egyptian kings. His name is Akhenaton.
He was not even on the list.
Not even
and amazing that all this discovery was made by 1 rial, as we used to call it, 20 piasters.
And the lady, she was very happy actually with the 20 piasters she get. So, and it's not only
he was moved from the list. That's amazing. I mean, just to know that, that's an amazing fact.
Exactly. So, and that's brought an interest for people to come and excavate from where these letters come from, because it tells the history.
And who is this man? I mean, if
too?
he was omitted, then he must have been very different, very
exactly, and not
unique.
And not only, because also most of the early archaeologists in that time, most of them come from a religious background, mostly Christians and Jewish religious background, and they had a great interest in excavating Egypt for biblical reasons. And these messages, they are pro-Hebrew, they are pro-Old Testaments, and that helped them greatly to understand the culture and the history of the people lived in this area even before Moses. Okay, so, and that's why also, that's the main reason why they have been attracted to that. And then when they came and they figured out...
So we know that his time in the Gregorian calendar, of course, that wasn't there, I mean, before Jesus. So we know that his time was even before Moses. We know that.
So that is still another debatable subject, but we can dedicate another episode for that. But Moses, from my perspective, most probably he was present in the 19th dynasty. That is from my personal perspective. It's difficult to say that he was earlier than the 19th dynasty. So Akhenaton from the 18th dynasty, which is mean that's most probably that was before Moses. So that's how, that's answering your question, how we knew that there is a king, his name is Akhenaton, and that's brought an interest, and they start excavating, and then they found things. Also, not only finding his capital and his tomb and the nobles' tombs, which is telling the history, but also another important finding. So I talked about there is temples he built for Aton, and these temples was built inside Karnak temple in the time that when he used to live in Thebes, which is Luxor today, before moving to the new city. So where this temple went? This temple has been taken down and cut it into pieces and used as a filling material for the walls and the constructions built after him inside Karnak temple. So during the excavation or restoration, some of the gates and walls in Karnak temple, by coincidence, so when they took these walls down to renovate and rebuild them again, they looked inside and they found blocks, beautiful. It has beautiful carvings and writings on it. So when they took it out, it was like a great puzzle, a big puzzle. They called the talatat, because each three of them, they make an image. So, and that was one of the biggest puzzle which tells us the history of Akhenaton, because he managed to reconstruct these shrines, at least virtually, to know the art and to know the religion and the history of this king. And still lots of holes. There is still much more things need to be rediscovered, The city of Akhenaton is still not fully excavated yet. And that's, I wish that we can find much more references.
Now we know that there's a lot of mystery about Akhenaton's life, even about his death, as we understood from you. You said that he was, as a young ruler, he wanted to go fast and to make a revolution against the priests.
Yeah.
So tell us about his height, at least his height while in power.
Okay, so in
the climax
yes,
before.
Exactly. So first of all, we need to understand if he was doing that mainly for political reason, is to put an end for the priesthood of Amun, or he was a true believer. That's another big question, which is still not being answered. So in my personally, I think he's a mix of both, because when he started promoting for his religion, it's very obvious that he was really convinced he is the solution. From his writings, even the Psalms and hymns, the hymns he wrote, which is identified with the Psalms of David, which is very similar to the Psalms of David, and that's a great similarity, which is there was a completely different historical period, Psalms of David, which is written a long time after Akhenaton, which is mean that both of them, they were the subject of influence of the same teachings, which is possibly Abraham teachings. That's why we'll go to Abraham again. So for me, he was a believer, but also he found in this belief a way in putting an end or solving a political problems himself and his family was suffering from for a long time. So it is a mix of both. And the nature of the human being, normally, when something like that with a very long influences in their mind, they don't know exactly why they are doing that. But they are doing that, thinking that they are doing that for religion, but in the back of their mind, there is some political influence as well. So while saying that it's not purely political, because Akhenaton, it seems not, for me, is not a political character. So a political character, we know how political characters, they like to grab the power, they like to spread their power everywhere, but he was acting different way. So he liked his city, and he put the boundaries of his cities, and he said, I'm not having intentions, to leave the city. So he wrote down in the text, and the translation is still debatable, if he really, means that he himself, he would not like to move away from the city, or he have another meaning, which he still don't know. So he used to meditate, and he used to worship Aton in his temple for a long time, and that was a subject of complaints of many people. They come to visit him. So one of them, actually, that was written in the letters of Al-Amarna, found in Al-Amarna, that's one of the ambassadors, which came from a foreign country, begging him to help him, to support him against his enemies, against his oppositions there. And he has to wait like for a few days, for the temple, because the temple is busy with his prayers. So that reflects how he was really a true believer, not only playing that just to get a political gains. Right. So how he came to the end, it is a really sad story, at least for me, which is...
the end of his dynasty, or his end of life?
The end of his life, the end of his idea, the end of his dynasty as well. We can wrap all that together today. So Akhenaton, he died in his early 40s, which is in ancient time to live the average age and time of death, that was quite low. But for kings, we have kings which have a very good food, a very good medical care. So we have kings lived for 90 and 95 years. So how he died is still a big question, cannot be answered until we found his tomb. So where is his tomb? He built a tomb for himself.
Mr. Abbas, before talking about the end of his dynasty, we'll go for a short break and we'll be back to continue this interesting story.
Thank you for staying with us, and welcome back. So, Mr. Abbas, we were talking about the end of the reign of Akhenaton, and we want to know when and how did the decline happen after what you said is about a 15 to 17 year period of reign, while he was focused more on himself or on his religious practices, more than on the military expansion like his father.
Exactly. So, then in the New Kingdom, we are talking about 1500 BC to 1300 BC. Like his reign is around 1400 BC to be more specific. So that was known for building an empire, and the empire of Egypt, the border of Egypt as an empire, reached up to Persia and south of Turkey in that time, and the heart of Sudan. So to keep this empire, that was a hard work, and that was like a work which is done very well by his father and grandfather and grandfather. But it seemed that he was not interested, and that was very clear from the messages which came recorded in Amarna letters from the also in the partner, but that there was associated rulers, which is in the Middle East. I'm trying to find the
allies.
Word. The allies,
his allies,
exactly.
yes.
His allies in the Middle East. And his allies were complaining that, where is the Egyptian army to support us because
against the common enemy,
because of against the oppositions. So because of that, we know that the empire starts shrinking, and that was a big threat, and that's possibly the reason why Queen T, which has a very important role during his father, decided to move from Thebes or Luxor to the new capital, Akhenaton, and in order to help her son in running the kingdom. So there was a decline, there was a gradual decline, especially in the borders, and that was a big annoy for everybody in the governmental system in that time. So then we'll go to your points, which is
the role of Nefertiti, his wife.
Okay, role of his Nefertiti, that's even before talking about his tomb. So Nefertiti, she was not only his beloved wife and his chief wife, because he has another, there is recorded he had another wife as well, but she was in the art during this time, she was almost exist with him in every art piece, and that was not common in the mainstream art of ancient Egypt back in that time. So when you look at the art, both of them has been introduced together, and most of the time they are almost on the same size, and even if Nefertiti is smaller, slightly smaller, not that much, like what happens after 19th dynasty or even earlier. And it seemed, and not only Nefertiti and his family and his daughters as well, and they were almost exist as a family scenes together with him in every scene. And it seems that Nefertiti had a very strong role in supporting his ideas, and that's explain why there was a conflict. We expect that there is a conflict happens between Nefertiti and her mother-in-law, which is Queen T, when she moved to Akhenaton, and some scholars saying that that is because of that Nefertiti moved from the big palace to another smaller palace in the north part of the city, so they stay away from each other. So then talking about his death, we still don't know how he died, but we know that he died in his early 40s, and which is still not a very old age for a king in ancient times.
So there is suspicion that he was assassinated?
And when you look at the religious historical conflict, there is a very big chance of that to happen. And he planned for himself to be buried in his tomb, the tomb which he built in a remote valley in his city. And he built a tomb of a new style, of a different style, not only for him and his family as well. And that was unlike the tradition. So the problem with Akhenaton is he's making lots of exceptions, not only in religion, in art, in history, in architectures, in everything. So, and that would make it a very rich subject to study as well, from where these exceptions came from. So anyway, it's still a mystery, how he died. The only way to solve this mystery is to find his mummy. which is nearly impossible. Why? Because after his death, there was...
It's not found in the tomb?
No, so there is nothing in the tomb has been found. So, and there is still a mysterious tomb called KB55 in the Valley of the Kings. And that was completely, that is the place which is Akhenaton, he will not like to be buried in. But it seemed that, so he was taken, his body was taken during the time of Tutankhamun, which is his son, by the way, to be buried there. And then shortly after, this tomb has been completely destroyed, KV55. So what we found there is just a skeleton, which is not even a mummy. A mummy destroyed, it became a skeleton. And there is nothing we can connect, no names or no titles, we can connect Akhenaton with it. But why we think that this mummy or this remaining of body belongs to Akhenaton? Because of the coffin, which is found in this tomb, a smashed coffin covered in gold with the royal beard, with the arms across the chest, we call the Osiris position, that was how the kings buried and mummified. With in the hands, there was supposedly the royal symbols, which does not exist, and on the coffin there is a royal name in a cartouche, but has been taken out, and a golden mask has been cut out. A thieves will not do that, because the thieves will take the whole gold, not be very specific, taking the face out, taking the royal symbols, and taking the names out.
So who insisted on rooting out his history?
So, but you know, before coming to this point, I would like to highlight a very important thing found on this coffin.
Please.
One symbol, which is referred to Aton. And that is possibly not being spotted by the people.
That's the KB55.
KB55, and that is because of this symbol, which is referred to Aton. That's because people think that this is the coffin and this is the body of Akhenaton. So, if we manage to prove that this is Akhenaton body by analyzing, by genetics, by genetic study, whatever, we can understand how he died, and which is still early for that. Now I come back to your question: is who insisted to do that? So, first of all,
and deprive us really, and deprive the world of this, of history, because history is the right of everybody.
So when you find a crime like that and you don't have a suspicious, you need to look for who will get a benefit from this situation. And number one is the priests of Amun. They lost their power and they would like to get their power back, and they had a tremendous power. So definitely they are behind that. So, and when the priests of Amun actually, when he died or when he killed, so he left a son behind, Tutankhamun. He was 9 years old. He became the king, and to become the king, because Tutankhamun comes, his mother Queen Kia is not of royal blood. She is the second wife, not the chief wife. And that's why he has to marry from one of his half-sisters, which has a pure royal blood, to be the king of Egypt. He married from Ankhis and Ba'atun. And then, somehow, they moved to Luxor. Think about 9 years old kid ruling the country. Who will be in control? He or his counselors? So among his counselors, definitely we think that Queen T was still alive in that time, his grandmother. And it seemed that he liked and he respected her much. And the evidence for that, we found a piece of a hair from the Queen T buried with King Tutankhamun, which is he wanted to be buried with a piece of his grandmother. So that is so he moved to Luxor or to Thebes, and he was enforced, or his counselors or his court enforced to bring the body of his father to be buried in Luxor as well. So that is the beginning, and not only, and also gradually, so changes has been happens, and we think that Tutankhamun has been enforced to change his name. By the way,
that was the next question. I mean, why go back to Amun and omit Atun?
Exactly. So because Tutankhamun, his name, as his father named him, is not Tutankhamun. His name is Tutankhatun, and has been changed into Tutankhamun. The evidence for that in the throne in the Egyptian Museum, that will be in display in the Great Museum, inshallah, when it's open. So it has the original name. It has a new name as well after changes. So the question is, if this change happens during Tutankhamun's life or after his death? Because there is another theory that Tutankhamun has been moved to Thebes after his death, and the tomb, the small tomb in the Valley of the Kings, has been made for him after his death. There is 70 days between the death and mummification to finish, and the burials, which is a mummification process. And we think that this is one of the theory that Tutankhamun tomb has been finished in rushed in a 70 days, and there is lots of evidence that the tomb is being rushed because it's not complete.
You were talking to us about the reaction of his wife after his death.
Yes, that was another also an interesting thing. So after King Tutankhamun died at the age of 19, very early death. And there is still another lot of theories when it comes to his early death. You know, some believe that he was killed. One of the early theory, which is by smashing his head with a mace, which is still like when about 20 years ago with got a scan, they proved that no, that is wrong, because this hole in the back of the skull is perfectly round, that was drilled during the mummification process or during surgery, whatever. But it's possible that he was killed in arranged accident. So on a horse chariot arranged accident, that's another theory as well. So the reaction of his wife tells us there is something about his death. It wasn't normal, because the first thing his wife did is to send a message to one of their allies in the Middle East, telling them, send one of your sons, like one of the kings of the Middle East, send one of your sons to marry from me, to make him the king of Egypt and rule Egypt with him, because I don't trust in anybody around me here. Think about trust, and she's a queen, and to bring a foreigner to rule the country, that's a very big news. She will not do that until she feels that her life in danger, and everybody is conspiring.
She must have. I mean, her husband died while he was 19.
He was 19 years old.
So he barely ruled anyway.
Exactly. He barely ruled.
Yeah.
So and until that time, we still, you know, Akhenaton traditions is not being erased, it's not being taken down from the walls, and his name is not being chiseled out, we assume. After, so the interesting thing that this message has been found by the Egyptian army intelligence at that time. And they let it go, because they waited for this king to send his son, and they sent the head to the queen, and they sent the head to the father back.
So who took out his...
That was the Egyptian army in that time. That was a very big news, you know, to bring a foreigner to run the country in that time. And that's why they knew about the letters. They have their spies on the course, you know, they let the letters to go to the destinations, and they sent the head back to the father. So in theory, that she was not comfortable with what was happening, and she was enforced to marry from a priest, possibly 50 years old at that time, and she was like 25 or 26 years old. And he started putting an end for Akhenaton teachings and his traditions and his history as well. And shortly after, you know, I ruled for a very short time, and then an army general, his name is Hor Moheb, came to power. And when he came to power, he led to a very
drastic change,
and he wiped out all of the monuments which is left by Akhenaton, you know, so his capital has been cursed, you know, so the monuments has been taken into downs and rubbles and stones and used as a filling material in order to build other buildings. And that's how the story of this king has been disappeared. So the important thing here, the practicality of this subject, how we can bring the history of this king back alive.
Yes.
So Shadi Abdus Salam, a very famous Egyptian director, you know, he was famous for the movie
El Mumia.
The Mumia. He was planning before his death a movie about Akhenaton. I've seen the sketches. They are in display in a gallery in the new library of Alexandria Bibliotheca. It will be planned to be an amazing movie, but it's not being finished. I think that it is a time to bring these sketches and these plans back to life again, because this movie will bring the history. Another way also to encourage travel and people to go and visit the area. So you can go and visit Amarna in one-day trip from Cairo and back. It is a long trip, like 4 hours drive each way, but you can do it. So you can do it in overnight trip and enjoy it more and see it in depth. You can do it together with Bani Hassan and Tun al-Gabal, which is wonderful sites, in 2 days, and come back to Cairo. So you can do it in 3 days driving tour to stop at Amarna, Beni Hassan, Tuna al-Jabal, Abydos, Dandara, and end in Luxor. Instead of flying to Luxor, you can drive. You can make it in 4 days tours and see more things in depth. You can do it in Nile cruise now, because the Nile cruise lines, you know, starting from Cairo all the way to Luxor and Aswan, that was started 2 years ago. And the best option to do it in a dahabiyya, in a sailing boat, and that's how you able to see Egypt from a boat, in Egyptian boats, and see Egypt from the eye of the ancient Egyptian people sailing the Nile River like the ancient Egyptian people did.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Hoping and praying that the coronavirus will go away so we can all
Travel
resume the tourism activities, the foreigners that will come to visit Egypt, and the Egyptians themselves who love history. We thank you very much, Egyptologist Samir Abbass. Always interesting, always informative, and looking forward to meeting you again soon.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samir. And by that, dear viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of The Breakfast Show. I'm Sheen Adel, and I was joined today by my colleague, Mohammed Abdelrahim. See you tomorrow with a new crew.